it. A little bit about me, why I'm always thinking about community ops, why I've always thought about community ops, and then breaking things down to this lovely acronym of Ops Top Dogs. I like to say that I came up with the acronym completely separate of the idea of having a ton of dog pictures and GIFs in my presentations, but that would be a lie. So we get to enjoy lots of pictures of dogs throughout because I'm obsessed. And this is our guy, Ted from Schitt's Creek, which is also an obsession of mine, giving a little pup talk. Go. All right, so a little bit about my background. I am very lucky in that I have gotten to work on some of the most amazing communities with the most amazing people in the entire world. And I worked at Atlassian, where I was very much focused on building out the user group program. That was back in 2013, beginning of 2013. So quite some time ago. And the program was nowhere with the powerhouse that it is today with the amazing team there. And I worked at Salesforce, and there I started with the MVPs and user group programs, but then eventually took over all of the community and running the community and community ops teams. And then now I'm at Venafi, and we are a machine identity management company. So thinking about authentication and certificates and authorization. And we have no community right now. We have, well, I'd say that we have a very, very small community right now that started when I started here about a year ago. So we are growing that, obviously growing my team and building that from scratch, which is really exciting. And with that, building teams is something that I have some experience in as well. I've gotten to do that pretty much everywhere that I've been, and it's real joy for me, and another point where I really focus a lot on ops. And then the last part is that I attribute a lot of my success to community ops. So I think that I know actually that I wouldn't have gotten to where I am in my career had I not focused on that as heavily as I have. And a lot of people are very surprised when I say this, but I find myself kind of leaning more towards ops than even community engagement, which might be a little bit surprising. I love both, but I really, really love ops. So most importantly, I'm not going to go through this whole presentation and not show a picture of my weenie dogs. I'm obsessed with weenie dogs. These are both mutts. I've got Zeus on the left, who is 17 years old, and then Chester, who's the devil, and he's about 1.5. And he's very cute, and he knows it. All right, so I've got a huge pet peeve when it comes to community ops, and I've heard it everywhere that I've been, in one way or another, and that is that ops are not sexy. And I am here to tell you that ops are very sexy. In fact, the sexiest to me. And what I hear from people as well, it's not as like bright and flashy as rolling out a new program, and it's something that isn't talked about as much, or not something you present to your leadership. And I'm here to say that it is, and we can, and we will. So a little bit about my history with ops, specifically where I've been, a little storytelling here. But when I first worked at Atlassian, it was really, we had forums, and it was all very disjointed, but the focus was on the OG program, which is the Atlassian user group program. And when I started, we said that we had 200 Atlassian user groups, and that kind of was true, but not really. So when I started digging into it, we maybe had somewhere between 30 and 50. There were 200 that had ever been onboarded, but they maybe had never met before, or they weren't meeting with frequency, or they hadn't met in a really long time. And so getting the right tracking in place was really important. So one of the first things I did was dedicate a lot of my time, and I'll kind of take a step back. For the majority of the time I was there, I was the only community manager. I was the only person on the community team. And we brought in interns here and there. We brought in contractors here and there, but really I was the one focused on this. So I was doing it alone, and that's what I prioritized. Well, I did prioritize a lot of things, which was not healthy. I was working long hours, but this is something that I prioritized, is getting all the user groups on one platform, tying that platform together with Salesforce so that we could track everything that was happening, and we'd know what groups were actually happening and what was active and where we needed to spend our time trying to reactivate groups. So that was huge. And obviously was a huge time commitment, but it ended up helping us springboard, to the next phase of what that user group program was going to be, and doing it at scale, and doing it in a smart way too. The other thing that I did was build out Jira Service Desk So Jira Service Desk it's basically like a support ticketing system. But the issue was that if somebody had a question that was in the community or wanted to join the community, they had to find someone's email address and they had to figure out who the community person was and then email them and then hope that that email didn't get lost in an inbox. And so pulling out Service Desk really centralized everything. And that was one of the first foundational things that I did to help things grow and do it at scale, so that when I had someone join my team, then everybody had the view of what was going on. Everybody could see the tickets, but then also we could label them and we could see what trends that we were seeing coming in and what questions that we were getting. And then we would be able to optimize for that. So that, I'll talk about optimization a little bit later, but I believe, and Cassie, correct me if I'm wrong, but you'll still use Jira Service Desk, right?
We do for swag requests.
Hot. I love that. That makes me so happy.
Swag requests for members, I suppose, not for leaders, but for members.
Okay, for members. So it still lives on in a tiny little thread, but it is what helped me survive, especially when I was adding contractors or interns or whoever to the team, because like an intern isn't going to stay forever. And so then if somebody has their email address versus a more centralized support ticketing system or one central email address, things just get lost and you don't have a consistency of experience for the people in your community. So anyway, that was Atlassian. And then moving on, I went to Salesforce. This GIF is an excellent representation. So when I started working at Salesforce, I was working for the Queen of Community, Erica Cole, and she started the Salesforce community. She has been in this industry for a very long time. She's brilliant. One of the things that I was worried about when I got there was that I would have nothing to do when I started working at Salesforce, that everything was amazing and what would my job even be? But when I got there, when I looked under the hood, the first things that really, kind of slapped me in the face were the fact that at Salesforce, we were managing everything in spreadsheets. And at Salesforce, we were running into the same issue that we were having with the random community person's email address. So if somebody wanted to be a user group leader, they had to, I don't know, I honestly don't know where they found these email addresses. They'd have to ask around and I don't know. So they had a lot of trouble, finding the right person to go to. It wasn't a good experience. It stifled growth of the program. So there were a bunch of things that were going on like that. Tracking everything manually in spreadsheets with such a huge community was a problem. And then also the same problem that we had at Atlassian is that we said we had, I forgot how many groups we said we had, hundreds, but really we did not. We had a much smaller number, maybe 100 active groups at that time, but we weren't tracking them. So same thing, I came in and I focused on getting everybody on the same platform. I focused on getting that platform, focused on getting everyone on the same platform. And then I focused on getting us a ticketing system. Salesforce owns every tool you could ever imagine to use for this stuff. So getting us, it was desk.com back then, but some kind of support ticketing so that anybody from the community, leaders, members, whoever, could message the team from one central email address, and getting all of the leaders their own logins and email addresses. So it was a lot about the tech stack and a lot about the processes that we needed to put in place to track our success, and just to streamline everything and to be able to do it at scale. And that ended up serving us very well, because by the time I left Salesforce, there were 1,300 user groups and they were having something like 500 events a month. And if you really think about that and the size of the team, even though the team grew, because when I started, it was 2.5 people technically, and then it grew, my team was 7 people. That's still not enough growth when you think about, we were also managing the MVP program, the online community. So we had to think a lot about what we were going to do to set things up and set up the right foundation for scale. And that is the reason, I think, is the reason that we survived, sometimes barely, but survived. All right, so this gets us to ops top dogs. I wanted to break things down and really think about what is community ops and what does it consist of? And so observe, plan, scale, track, optimize, platform, which platform tech stack is kind of the same thing, documentation, operational budget, guidance, and special projects. And we're going to dip into each of these. And then I won't go too far into each of these. So if y'all have questions, we can focus on what y'all really want to focus on. First is observe. How much does it drive you crazy when somebody starts working at the same company as you and they come in and without understanding anything, the history, the context, why decisions were made, they start telling you everything that you're doing wrong, or everything that needs to change, or everything that you can make better. Or, well, when I was at X company, this is what we did, so this is what we need to do. It will drive you bonkers. And so that's a shout out to Erica Cool, who uses that word all the time. Anyway, it drives you crazy. And so when you first come into a situation where you're learning, you need to observe. You need to understand how things run now, what the priorities are of the team, what the goals are of the team. Try to see where the biggest bottlenecks and pain points are, and understand the right questions to ask. So really start formulating questions that you want to be asking different stakeholders or just different people in the company to get the information you need to make informed plans as you're moving forward. So that goes to plan. So once you gather this information, you spend real time observing, asking questions, learning, figuring out places where things might improve, but you have the context around them or the history around them to know how they got to the place that they are. Then it comes to planning. And so you can't really just jump into operations without taking a moment and planning what you need to do, because there's a lot that operations touch, and you don't want to waste your time working on something that's not going to have the most value in the beginning. So you're going to look at the priorities of the business, you're going to look at the priorities of the team, and then you're going to start planning based on those, and planning based on the priorities to help the team scale or to optimize what they're doing, which I'll get to in a minute. But think about all of these things and plan out a roadmap for operations, but that operations roadmap needs to be laid on top of what's happening with the team roadmap and figuring out what makes the most sense. And maybe the team roadmap has to change a little bit to fit within the operations plan too, because operations are that important. If you can swap something that will allow you to scale or automate, part of a program that desperately needs to be done, that frees up time for you to work on another program, like, it is worth that investment. So planning is very important. Deciding on your planning management tools, all of those things fit under plan. And then scale. I keep thinking about scale. I keep talking about scale because everywhere that I've been, we didn't start with a huge community team, and thinking about the growth that the community has, community, it hits its stride and it grows fast. And so you have to be thinking about, even right now, even if your community is small, you have to be thinking about what this looks like at scale and building to grow at some point. And that means putting the foundational things in place that will allow you to scale. So a great example is like a support ticketing desk. It may just be you right now. Your community may know your email address and they may email you directly when they have an issue, but what happens when you bring someone on? Then you have to teach that new behavior to your community. So thinking about those types of things and getting set up for scaling is going to be very important. And as you grow, it might change a little bit. You're not going to be able to have everything in place right off the bat, but having that mindset as you're building, knowing what you can put in place that will be easy to change later, won't be detrimental to change later, that's a mindset that you have to have. I think I did this last time I presented this, but this dog riding on the Roomba, that's my gift for automation. All right, so I talk a lot about scale. I just mentioned that I talk a lot about scale. I think it's probably the second most important thing that you can do. Track is, in my opinion, the most important thing that you can do. So you can see measure, data. I can't stress enough how important this is for a comm ops role for so many different reasons. But the way that tracking looks to me is building out the entire set of tools, the tech stack, to track and measure everything that your team is doing. And you're looking at, the way that I look at the metrics, you're looking at your health metrics for the community, and then you're looking at your ROI business metrics for the community. And that's, where your stakeholders really care about what you're doing. The tracking and measuring leads you to deliver these insights that talk about what your community is doing, what is your community healthy, but also what the team is doing. So these insights will show you what your team is working on, what they're spending the most time on, so you can make really smart decisions about the road forward. And so I can't stress enough how important this is. But then the other piece of it is business buy-in. If you really need resources, you do. And if you need resources, right? And if you want to show the value of community ops, of your community, of, the business ROI of community, you cannot do it without this. And this is so closely tied into your tech stack and your platforms that your ops person really needs to focus on an entire strategy around this piece. So I cannot stress this enough. Tracking, measuring, and getting as much data as you can from everywhere that you can, pulling it all together is really important. And I've mentioned this before, ComStore is a really awesome tool to do that. We leveraged Salesforce to do that. So by whatever means that you can, figure out what the tool is, bring it all together in one place, and then figure out how you're going to track everything. Now, it's really important that I mention this. This is not one person's responsibility. Tracking as an ops person, you are putting all the systems and tools in place to enable your team to be able to pull the data that they need and to pull the insights that they need. Now, you may pull insights as an ops person around ops, and what processes can be better streamlined or where the team's spending most of their time. But really, you've got to enable your team to be able to do a lot of this themselves. The next is optimize. So I kind of just mentioned that. You're taking the data that you're seeing from tracking everything you're doing on the front end and back end of programs, and you're using that to optimize what you're doing. So if you see a bottleneck somewhere, you can tell that from the data and you fix it. So you're getting tons of support tickets around X process. Let's say it's submitting a request for swag. So you're getting, tons of requests for that. It's a really manual process. You know that you can optimize by updating that process and figuring out what you need to do to make that better. Maybe it's a knowledge-based article. Maybe it's thinking about automation for some of that. But this is where you'll be able to take everything that you're doing and make it better. This is never ending, especially when you think about scale. So you can put some things in place for scale, like I said, but it's not going to last forever. You're going to have to continuously be optimizing as the needs of your program change, as your program grows, as the people in your program change, as your team changes, a million things. But just know that this is an ongoing one, but you can do this in a very, very smart way based on the data that you're collecting across all of your programs, front end and back end. Next is platform. And this one I mentioned tech stack, platforms. You've got an online community, you have a platform for that. You have events, you have a platform for that. As an operations person or thinking about the role of operations, this is a great one that fits, the operations kind of the hub of. So helping figure out exactly what your needs are around platforms, and then going through and finding the right vendors, interviewing vendors, making vendor scorecards, working with the vendors on ideas and enhancements and requests. I mean, everything that comes along with that, collecting feedback, collecting your team's feedback for all of these platforms. And I think that's another really great operational piece, because these platforms all working together the right way, all of the integrations working together the right way all roads lead back to measuring and scale. So that's exactly what you do with platforms and what an operational person would manage, and the rollout of these platforms and the training the team on the platform. So all of those different pieces, I think, fall under this one as well. And it's a big one, obviously. I mean, it's what your community is operating off of. Documentation. If y'all haven't had a chance to listen yet to the Masters Community podcast with our very own Tiffany Oda, she's giving me a look right now, but she mentions documentation in this. And I think she had made a really great point. If you are just getting started in ops and you want to make an impact and you don't know where to begin, but you want to operationalize things for your team, think about documentation, because I have yet to ever work anywhere where you've walked in and all the documents are just organized perfectly in one place and you know where to go to get everything. Everything's all over the place, and there's dead documents everywhere. There's no hierarchy for how documentation is organized. And so that's a place that you can get in and be really effective, so that your team isn't spending 20 minutes looking for a document, that could be really well organized and kept up to date. Now, I say this, but just like I was saying before, this is not entirely your ops person or your ops team's responsibility. Sure, they'll write documentation on processes and tech stack and all of those different pieces. They'll help you figure out how to plan for documentation, organize the documentation, but this is everybody's responsibility. But following the structure and strategy that your ops person puts in place is really, really important for this. So everybody plays a role in this. amongst a lot of the other things that I mentioned, but certainly this one. And I just think this is, Tiffany made a great point. This is a really good one that you can get started with and have immediate impact. Next one is operational budget. So I think this does fall under ops. I'll kind of get into why in a little bit, but developing the best tools and practices to measure what you're doing in terms of budget. You have to keep track of your budget if you have one. Some itty bitty, some are a little bigger, but thinking about how your team spends. Everybody has to be empowered to spend the way that they need to. Obviously not with going crazy, but like if everybody's running a separate program or initiative, it's got to be easy for everybody to know what their boundaries are, and so operationalizing the budget is very important. So that's not just submitting everything to procurement or whatever the process is like internally for your company, but building out a process for your community team as well. Really, really important, because that visibility will make sure that you're spending your money well. Everybody knows what everybody else is spending. You'll know where you are over, under, so you can start making adjustments. And so your leadership can start making adjustments as needed as well. But then also like this person is working with your tech stack. So they're going to be the person that's going to be working with your vendors and all that stuff. So it just seems to fall into place for me, and makes sense that a lot of the operational or the budget, there's a lot of operations pieces to it. All right, guidance. So I've mentioned this a few times, I've sprinkled it in, but everybody has a role to play in community operations. The person that is focused on community operations is going to be the person that provides guidance to the team on how to best fit what they're doing into the structure that exists, or how to best ask for or research or figure out what they need in terms of operations. They'll work with them on that. So if you are an operations person, you cannot do everything yourself. We'll get there, but in a second. But it's really, really important that you're also taking the time to teach and enable your team to put the processes and systems that you've put in place to actually use them and leverage them, so that you're not the single source of truth, that there's no single source of failure either. If you're gone, people need to be able to pull reports. They shouldn't have to tap you on the shoulder and ask all the time for you to pull something for them. So self-service opportunities are the things that you can build, but then you can also provide learning and guidance. Actually, a good takeaway from the Masters of Community podcast with Tiffany, she was talking about how when she posts documentation on a process or how to do something, she'll post it out there to the team, but she'll put little Easter eggs in the instructions. So like an emoji somewhere that somebody has to find. So she's ensuring that people are actually reading and learning about all of these different things, because in the end, all of these systems are put in place to make things less manual, for fewer questions, so everybody is able to do the work that they need to do as quickly and as efficiently and smartly as possible. And so making sure that you're providing that guidance to the team and not just shouldering all of that because you're the ops person is really, really important if you want to achieve scale. And then next is special projects. I love this weenie dog. His name is Crusoe, and he's called Crusoe the Celebrity Dachshund, and they put him in like all sorts of situations and clothes. He seems to love it though, so I'm all for it. He's just so cute. Anyway, he's so special. See, that's how it ties in. I actually don't remember why he made it to this slide, but oh yes, I do, because working with legal. So special projects. Tiffany's laughing at me from across the room, as per usual. It's still very nice to be in a room with another human. So special projects, there's a bunch of other stuff that can fall under the umbrella of operations. And so you think about like accessibility with your platforms, working with the legal department on terms and conditions, GDPR, domain and SSL management, governance, M&A, other programs. And when I say M&A, that's mergers and acquisition. So this is something that I am fascinated with, and I really hope I have an opportunity to dig into a lot more. But we've seen fully mature communities that, companies that have fully mature communities that get acquired, and they're acquired by companies with fully mature communities. So what does that mean? Do you merge them? Do you not merge them? How do you have them touch without losing their identity? There's some fascinating stuff there. And I think that there's some fascinating stuff there in terms of brand and identity, but also with the operational piece too. Like, what on the back end do you want to do to see the touch points across both communities if you don't merge them? So just, I mean, so many things on this list. This is not an exhaustive list at all. And that kind of brings me to this point, which is that can one person do everything that I just talked about? And I think you know my answer. No, that's crazy. And I say crazy, certainly there's tons of teams that are one person. And so you're expecting a community manager that's focused on engagement and everything. And then that they're also supposed to be focused on ops. It's wild. I mean, there's no other team that you see that's the expectation, at least at larger companies. So I think that specializations will be coming. So just like you see specializations within community management, so you've got moderators, or you've got people that are handling community escalations, or you've got community strategists, kind of read both, but you've got specializations within community management. Just like in marketing, you have people that are email marketers, you have people that are focused on SEO, everybody has their specializations. You will see this in operations. You will see a head of operations, and it will branch out to other specializations. So you'll see a head of operations, and then somebody that's operations that's working on policies and guidelines, and they work closely with the compliance team and the legal team. Or you'll see somebody that's focused purely on accessibility within the product, or purely on feedback with, when I say product, sorry, I mean the tech stack and platforms. Same thing. And I think we'll see that really break out a lot more, because this is a lot for one person to have to try to navigate, even if they're doing the most amazing job in the entire world, getting everything done at scale. This is to me a non-negotiable. It has to grow. So I think we'll see a lot more specializations. I have put such an emphasis on operations everywhere that I've been. When I was at Salesforce, my team was people on reporting to me, and on the team 6 people, and 2 were community ops. So if you think about how big the Salesforce community is, and the emphasis that I put there, that I wanted a third of my team, and I wish we could have grown more, and I would have hired more for community ops, because that ended up making our team a powerhouse, truly, and able to operate at a completely different level that we would have. So I think specializations are coming, and you will see more of ops teams, and more of the ops role, and more of ops teams. So there's going to be a need for them to grow. And so just like community used to be one person, now you're seeing teams grow and specializations. It's bound to happen in the operations side of the house too. Here you go again, ops top dogs. And I talked just a little bit longer than I wanted to, but thank you for being the perfect audience. And these are my babies. They're so cute. And yeah, so I will stop there. Hopefully I wasn't talking too fast. And yeah, I'll stop here, stop sharing, and y'all can ask questions.
So it looks like Mary has a question, and thank you for that amazing talk, Holly.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I'm Mary. I'm the new Chief Community Officer at a software company called Ironclad. We're getting ready to launch our community in a couple of weeks, and I mentioned in the chat, I spent a good amount of my background in operations and in community on the side. My question for you is, your team at Salesforce managing such a big community with 7 people, is that the whole community team, or was that, yes? Like everyone that touched community. So what were the other roles in the 7 that, like, how did you structure it?
So I'm turning red right now. I'm so embarrassed, because I realized you sent me an email that I don't think I wrote back to. So I owe you. Your name just popped up for me. I don't know. Oh gosh. Anyway, so hello. I have my inbox. So the team was split up. I was a community strategist, and that was one of the 7. And then we had I guess she was like senior community director of community management. And then she had 3 community managers under her. And so we had someone that was focused on engagement, somebody that was focused on content, and somebody that was focused on product. So the relationship between the community and the product teams. And then the other side of the house was ops. So we had community ops, and we had a senior manager and a specialist that worked for that senior manager. And Mary, I actually, on my blog, I have a blog post where I have the whole team structure outlined and why I went down that road where I had specializations versus program specializations. So you can find it there, and it like really does a deep dive into all of that too.
If anybody else has questions, just feel free to go off mute. Keep it casual around here.
I can keep going. If you had your ideal team size to manage that kind of organization, what do you think it would have been like? How would it have looked?
Well, I really have to think about that. What I think we were missing is we needed multiple dedicated community product managers. We needed someone that was very specifically working on M&A, because the M&A at Salesforce, I mean, you think we acquired MuleSoft, huge community. We acquired Slack, huge community. That could be someone's full-time job, and to do it right, I think that would have been amazing. So product manager, designer, marketer. We did have a marketer that sat on another team that was very focused on community marketing. So to be fair, we did have that. And I think that was really great because it gave them an opportunity to report up to another marketer. So they had, career growth opportunities, but they were strictly dedicated to our team. So to be fair, we did have that. But community developers, like you could really, I mean, if you look at community like a product, you could build out a team that looks entirely like that. So you would have your HR, you would have your support, you would have all of these different elements. At Salesforce, our operations team was managing the support queue and kind of triaging all the tickets out to the community managers, but that was still like a lot for two people to do, is manage the support queue and all these operations pieces. So I would have grown that out massively too.
I'd love to jump in and ask a question. This is Allison. Sorry, I'm not on camera today. I'm actually in the process of launching a community, and I've also been tasked with building a future team. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective what I can be doing to really set a good foundation and groundwork for that future team, knowing that right now, especially, I'm balancing all the roles in one.
My face is just like, oh, the pain. Do you know, when you say future team, so they're just having you like think about your roadmap and strategy for how you're going to build your team over the next, do you know how long?
Essentially, I've been told that I will get a team in the future. I need to, of course, prove success with our initial launch.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been given, I will say, a really healthy budget to do that. I can't complain. So I am very excited about that. And we've already started looking at adding a content person, which is also very exciting. But I need to kind of prove success before I can make that ask. And part of that is, of course, that role development piece and being prepared to, go to them to ask for specific roles. But I want to make sure that I'm setting myself up in a good way to kick it off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think figuring out it all goes back to goals, right? If you're asking your leadership for budget for anything, it comes back to, well, what are we getting out of it? What's the ROI? How does this tie to our goals? So figuring out exactly how you're going to tie the work that you're doing in community to your company goals to prove value is really, really important. And then showing what they can get, or what your plans are, roadmap, if you add one person to the team, and this is the person you would add and their job description. It's a lot of work, but like you kind of have to figure out how you want to build out your roadmap to take that into account. So you say, if you give me one person, this is what we're going to get this year. And this is how it ties to the company goals. If you give me two people, this is what we're going to get this year. And this is how it ties to the company goals. And then as you set up your team, I would hire an ops person as soon as possible, because that's really going to get all of your foundational pieces in place to be able to prove value as well. And in the interim, setting up something like, so it depends there's a lot of variables with your community, but I do recommend setting up something like a support ticketing system or something, so you can see what's coming in, the volume of things that are coming in from your community, so you can really quantify where you're spending your time, which might help you also decide who you want to hire next on your team too.
Thank you so much. The roadmap thing seems so obvious, but I love how you laid that out, and how I could tie that even to our overall community roadmap as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes you just have to go to them and say, you woo them with what could be, you know, but the reality is there's resources needed for that. So it's like option A, option B, it's your decision, but you can't have option A if I don't have the right resources.
Holly, this might have a similar answer. Also, hi, been a while.
Hi.
But so if I've got one community with one person managing it right now, I expect it to grow and get complex pretty quickly. What are the signposts that I should look for to hire somebody dedicated for ops to help manage that community and grow it?
Are you running a community? Yes. Do you want it to grow? Yes. There you go. Hire your ops person. I think right now, I mean, the way my team looks right now, building from scratch at Venify, started with me. I hired Sofia Rodriguez-Mata, who's an amazing community professional, and she's our director of community. And she helped scope out what we were going to pick for the platform and really starting to think about how we build out our programs. But it was like pretty immediately after I knew it was going to be either one of them that I would hire first. But then I hired an ops person, which is Tiffany, which I can't even, she's the best one in the entire world. Cassie's also the best one in the entire world. Sorry, not to be rude. There's a tie, but I am so lucky. So lucky to have Tiffany on my team. And I wouldn't change that because there's so much, I mean, she's so busy. There's so many things that need to be done to set us up for success foundationally.
Oh,
and Allison, I have the one that I used for Tiffany I can share with you. She's more senior level ops person, but you could probably format it to be for whatever level you wanted it to be.
I will take anything that anyone is willing to share.
Okay. Actually, you know what? I believe I have a job description on my blog. Actually, there's a slide that I have for each role, and it's not a full job description, but it kind of outlines some of the what they work on. And so that's on, I did a series called Teamwork Makes the Dream Work. There's 4 different parts, and team roles and responsibilities are like how I structured my team. There should be a slide there that that has all that information too.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah.
And this may seem obvious to everybody on this call, but this is one question that I often get is, I technically have a senior manager role, which I think can also sometimes be tied to like a director level. And one of the questions I get is, shouldn't the director or senior manager be in charge of operations and really running that? So what is the difference between the two roles?
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy question at all, because that's, I mean, essentially what I've had to do to get buy-in for the operations roles. I had to do it myself for a while first and then bring someone in. But the reality is I have to ride on both sides of this. You know, I really need to be focused on the programs that we're running, engagement, content, comms, marketing, internal selling, you know, getting the internal marketing piece done, and operations, and figuring out exactly what all of that looks like, compliance, working with our legal team. Now, the people on my team are doing a lot of that, but then there's got to be a level up where there's reviews, approvals. I'm communicating all of that to my exec team, you know, and bringing all that information back down too. So it's really, there wouldn't be a way long-term for me to do both, to operate at the level that I need to operate at. So it's like, once you start building out your team, that also gives you the opportunity to up-level the work that you're doing and think more about bigger team building strategy, things like that. And I guess it's a little, in my situation, like I spend a lot of time in exec team meetings and board meetings, you know, so I can't do both, but I hear what you're saying. Like, I think that if you kick it off, you know, you can build the case for it at the same time as you're kicking off, you know, the engagement piece and building a case for that, but you're limited. And it goes back to that roadmap. Like, sure, yeah, you can do some of the operations now, but what do you have to give up to do that? I hope that makes sense. I kind of talked in a circle, but like, it really comes down to that. What are the trade-offs? And you have to be able to show those trade-offs and then show the value that you get when you expand.
Super helpful. Thank you everyone for sharing as well. I also love that idea of kind of illustrating the trade-offs to those that you're reporting to as well. Like, well, I can do this much with my given bandwidth, but guess what I could do if I had more too. So that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. When you mentioned, like selling it to your managers of like trying to a woo situation, could you give an example of what a woo situation might be?
What do you mean? Like how I got an XYZ?
Yeah, like how you got a Tiffany, you
Tiffany.
had to woo somebody to say, this is what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. What was the situation of wooing, or that you kind of put in front of them to say, convince, I suppose?
That's a really good question. It's different now at Venafi because I'm on the exec team, so I have a little bit more flexibility. Like I just talk to my boss, who's our CEO, and say, this is what we're doing, this is why we need it, which is great. It's like y'all, I'm like living the community dream right now. I'm not kidding, between my team and my boss. But I think before, when I was at Salesforce, so we brought in community operations. Tiffany came in actually for a program management role, but like the more she was in that role, the more it evolved across the whole team. We had people focused on different programs. So like 2 on the user group program, 1 on the MVP program, but we didn't have a good group of people that could talk. They're an amazing group of people, but we didn't have the ability for everybody on the team to talk about our programs across the board, which was really, really important. And that doesn't give you any upward mobility in your career, right? So you're not going to be like director of MVP, like you may be director of like community product management. You may, that gives you, if you have a specialization, a chance to advance. So that's kind of where things broke out and where operations came from very specifically at Salesforce. But then we had to make a case for Tiffany to get a head count, or I guess she reported to me first and then reported to Tiffany. But that was sheerly, we made that case by what was coming into the support queue. Like, look at all these tickets that are coming in, look at what we can and can't optimize. Sorry, Sophia just came in too. It's amazing to be in a room with my whole team. And so what can and we can't optimize, what needs to be done, and the sheer volume of those tickets. You can't argue with numbers, right? You can't argue that this stuff's coming from your customers and they need help and we can't get to them fast enough, or if we do, this is the trade-off. So, I think that that's how we made the case for, that was Kendall Odom, who's now at Twilio. She's amazing too, but that's how we made the case for her when we already had an ops person that we needed more.
Okay, yeah, no, I selfishly asked because I'm in the stage of trying to woo, so yay.
All right, well, we've got about 5 minutes left. Cassie, do you want to jump into, sorry, echo. Do you want to jump into the slides, the closing slides?
Let's make sure I can successfully do it. Present. Awesome.
All right, so as Cassie mentioned, when we kicked off, we're actually starting an 11-month Ops Top Dogs series inspired by Holly. Each month is going to be covering the next letter in the acronym. So for next month, we're going to be starting with O for observe. And we're looking for speakers. So if you have a story or experience to share where, you've observed something or you've noticed something that has, sparked change within the team or within the community, anything noteworthy, we'd love to hear your stories. So feel free to email us or Slack us. We're on both the CMX and the Community Club workspaces. And we're very flexible too. So speak for as long or as short as you'd like to. If you want slides, that's amazing. If you don't want slides and just want to chat, that's amazing too. We'll take pretty much anything. And we want to hear from you. So please let us know. And date is TBD. It's probably going to be end of August, but obviously we're flexible.
Awesome. So then on that note, I just want to call out that Tiff and I do have a community on Luma called Observations. So if you want to stay updated on upcoming events, recordings, and slide decks, you can join that. Tiff created a bit.ly link. Thank you for that. So bit.ly/community observations, because we're punny. But yeah, Also, another big call out, Tiffany was on David Spinks's podcast, Masters of Community, talking about all things community operations. So definitely check that out. All these links will also be available on that Luma community page that I was talking about. So after this meeting, I'll upload the recording, the slide deck. So probably within the next 3 hours, all of this information will be available to you on there. So definitely join us so you can stay updated on all the things. And thank y'all for joining us.
And thank you, Holly, for speaking. It was great listening to the session again.
Yes, thank you so much. Everybody was super engaged and really appreciated it. So obviously we do too.
Thank you.
And yeah, thanks for coming, y'all. Like Tiff said, our email, opsforcommunity@gmail.com if you need us, or Slack. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.